And we're back. And if you're joining us now, we are just jumping into our first conversation for this morning. And as we said earlier, we are providing our COVID-19 update, and we are going to be talking all about the new protocols in the tourism industry. And joining us for this conversation, we have with us Karen Bevans, who is the Director of Tourism with the Belize Tourism Board. And we also have Misty Michael, who is the Director of Marketing and Industry Relations with the BTB. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Gabby. Good morning, Marlene.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a topic which I'm sure lots of people are interested in. But before we get into the protocols, I just suppose we can start our conversation just by talking about, it's very early days since the airport has been open, but what are things kind of looking like on the ground in terms of tourist arrivals and people coming in to visit Belize? How are we looking really early on in the recovery phase?
Gavin, if I may start, if you allow me to just maybe recap where we were
Sure.
Pandemic, and then we could get into where we are today and give an indication of our target going forward.
Sure.
I think in December of 2019, we celebrated reaching our 500,000 overnight tourist arrivals for the first time in history. And at that time, we had mentioned as well that we had a goal in our National Tourism Master Plan, where in 2030, we were projecting a certain number of arrivals, there about 550,000. So in December of 2019, despite having 10 more years to go for that goal, we were already at 90% of achieving that goal. In cruise tourism at that time, we were over 1 million cruise passenger arrivals, and that was for the fourth consecutive year in a row. January 2020, we had similar growth trend. In February 2020, similar growth trend again, and March was also looking very bright for us. And on March 13th, we had our last cruise ship arrival, and on March 23rd was when the Philip Golson Airport was closed, making all port of entry closed to Belize. Then at that time, of course, we had to change gears and get into multiple tasks to try to look how we move forward, considering the pandemic. We had to, of course, be liaising closely with the Ministry of Health for continuous updates on the pandemic. We did quite a number of research. In fact, we're still researching up to today. Webinars, stakeholder consultation, and of course, we could not forget the marketing. While we had to go very low on the marketing, we still think that we had to keep Belize on top of mind. And Misty could, of course, get into some of the things we had to do during the pandemic to ensure that Belize remained at the forefront.
Yeah.
And fast forward now, we had to implement many other protocols or national guidelines, health and safety protocols to ensure that we are a safe destination for when travel resumes. Because mainly our research was showing that travelers were looking for safety. Because of social distancing, they want to ensure space is available, so our low population density was an advantage. Mm-hmm. And or the fact that Belize had many outdoor activities and attractions, those all are advantages for us and put us in a good position to be ready to resume travel.
Yeah.
That then fast forward to October 1st, the airport opened.
Yeah. How many tourists have arrived in the country so far?
Let me just get you the exact figures. The first 3 weeks, we had 708 passenger arrivals with 460 tourists.
Yeah.
That's around about 65% thereabout. In the second week, which is the 5th to the 11th of October, 839 passengers with 485 tourists. And the third week, which was just last week, 790 with 539 tourists.
Okay. Now, I mean, clearly this is a unique time in being able to learn more from your travelers as to what their expectations are when they come to Belize and whether or not they were met. Was there any type of feedback gotten from those who have arrived in the country, and what are they saying?
I can speak to that a little bit. Morning again, everybody.
Morning.
In terms of the new protocols that have been put in place specifically at the airport, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. Passengers are pleased to see the extent to which the country has taken health and safety measures. Although the arrival process is a little bit more complex now, they're pleased with the pace at which they can move through that process. There are many, many teams on the ground that were not necessarily there before COVID, particularly where health is concerned, because now all arriving passengers must either bring along a negative PCR test or they get tested upon arrival before they can continue into the arrival hall for immigration and customs processing. So we've gotten a lot of really good feedback. We've also gotten some good recommendations that we're looking to see how we can implement to make the process a little bit more efficient. And of course, the in-country experience leading up to the Prime Minister's press conference last week, Friday, there was some concern from our stakeholders that the safe corridor measures that were put in place were a little bit too restrictive. Yeah. And tourists that were attempting to book vacations in Belize, they would go ahead, they would make their reservation, and when they would find out the protocols that were in place, we were having some issues with carrying out the bookings. So after many, many consultations, the National Oversight Committee, in collaboration with the industry partners, made the decision to relax the measures somewhat to allow for a little bit more freedom of movement for tourists that are visiting.
Yeah. I mean, I think this was an issue that, in fact, the PGIA had raised, and it was a very simple situation. The first protocol was created at a time where we didn't have COVID, and so they were very stringent, rightly so. And so I think it seems to be a shift that is celebrated across the sector. But looking at the profile of tourists now, we know what was expected before 2019. How much of the people who are interested in traveling to Belize, have they changed in what they're looking for?
I think, Marlene, to start off on that, the number one is safety. Mm-hmm. Travelers are now getting a bit more comfortable. If you were, or I should say that on Sunday was the first time that the TSA have reached 1 million passenger screening. Wow. And that was done last April to less than 100,000. Now passing through the airport in the US, or passing through TSA in the US, is at 1 million. Pre-COVID, it was at 2.5 million. Mm-hmm. That is to show that travelers are getting a bit more comfortable with traveling. Yeah. While they still have that concern, I believe once they know that the destination is implementing that all the safety measures, and they can travel and feel safe, the travel will resume, and I do think that the increase will continue. Most of the travelers now, the word of mouth marketing will help Belize significantly. The feedback we have received, as Misty mentioned, from the initial opening of the airport, all positive feedback. While the expectations were different, I think all persons coming in have been pleasantly surprised. Less than an hour, we are outside the airport, and all mention is that the process was smooth. Enter into a gold standard hotel, all the safety measures have been implemented using their gold standard transportation. They can see that all our stakeholders are implementing safety measures, and that's their number one concern. That word of mouth will continue, and Belize then will be seen as a very safe destination. The other thing they're looking for is social distancing. I think everyone that arrived in Belize so far has mentioned Ministry of Health ensure that social distancing is adhered to and observed at the airport. So again, those are all positive factors that going out for Belize are testament to what we're doing here and what the travelers are looking for. So I think that goes well for Belize, and we should now see that increase and increase going forward.
Now, I believe it was noted that October is already expected to be a slow month on a usual year. But this is the time where we would generally see an uptick and we head into the high season. From what you're seeing so far, I know that currently the projections are clear. You're not going to see the levels of 2019 travel maybe another year, 2 years. But from what you're seeing so far, how optimistic are you that we'll be attracting and having people coming to the country?
We are encouraged. Listening to our stakeholders, the interest is high. And I do think the decision made last week at the press conference, or the decision announced that we will be relaxing some of the restrictions and limitations, will help us even further. But the interest is there. The stakeholders are seeing that they are being searched. When we look at the amount of searches for Belize, we can see the increase. But now we want to ensure that we convert those into bookings. And hence the reason now the promotion and all the relaxation that we have done has stepped up and increased.
Yeah. Do you have a number as yet? I think when you look at the projected revenue for this year and what the actual loss was?
The projected revenue, it's too early to tell.
No, I mean from what was first expected before, COVID reared its ugly head.
Well, what was expected and where we are, I would say 0%. Because we basically just started October 1st, and no hotel taxes are not due until the 14th of the following month. So we are still at 0. It will begin to pick up, we can see that. And again, because of the interest and the relaxation measures, we are optimistic that it will pick up. But it's a bit too early to tell because we are still at 0 and just hoping for the best.
And in terms of like the actual numbers of hotels, what do we know how many are open, that are open now, and how many gold standard hotels people are able to come to? Because of course, if we compare to last year, we know we had a big. It was going to be much bigger when we talked about hotels and the amount of people overnight tourists. So how many hotels have reopened? How many are at the gold standard?
To date, we received 311 applications, and 222 already approved and updated on our website as well. On the tour operator side, we have 197 applications and 156 approved to date. So we can see the applications coming in, and stakeholders now are ready to open for the high season.
Yeah. But the current regulations, as it exists, I mean, the shift that has been made since the start of this week, right? A tourist can arrive, travel to their hotel, and now they're free to go essentially anywhere. Because they're not restricted to gold standard certified institutions. So what has been the messaging that went out to all stakeholders? Maybe they haven't been through this very rigorous certification process to know all the details. How have you kind of guided them on how to ensure that they can stay safe and they can also keep the tourists safe?
All right, let me first clarify that point, Marlene.
Yes.
Because the tourists coming in fact, pre-arrival, the tourists must book and stay at a gold standard accommodation.
Yes.
When they arrive, yes, they will be at a gold standard accommodation. So the gold standard requirement is still mandatory for all accommodations.
Okay. And then in where they are able to go, what restaurants they're able to visit or moving around?
Yes, there is freedom of movement, so the tourists can basically move around and enjoy all the amenities and attractions in Belize. We are, of course, at BTB, recommending and encouraging and promoting that the tourists remain in the safe corridor. The reason for that is that the safe corridor includes all gold standard entities. Once you are gold standard certified, we can attest to the level of safety measures and the sanitization and all the health and safety protocols that you have implemented, because there's a process for that. So we can attest to that once we know you're certified, and we want to ensure that when we market to the tourists, we already know the tourist is looking for safety. We already know they want to ensure cleanliness. Those are the factors now that they're considering. We want to ensure that when we market that when you come to Belize, that is what is delivered. So we want to ensure that all stakeholders in the tourism industry implement these protocols so that when the tourists get here, we deliver on what we market and what we promise.
Yeah, yeah. And you said that there are new stakeholders who are applying to do the certification process now because they can take visitors.
Yes, what we're doing is enhancing the program, or expanding the program, I should say. Under the BTB, we have the hotels and tour operators. They are required to have gold standard certification. But however, we have, of course, other entities that operate and link directly or directly connected with the tourism industry. For example, restaurants, car rentals. So we are now adopting the program that we have applied for accommodations and tour operators, and customizing it for sectors like restaurants and gift shops, offering that program now to other areas in the industry so that we can ensure that not only the hotels and tour operators that falls under the BTB's regulatory regime are at a gold standard level. We want to ensure that when the tourist comes, whoever they interact with, whichever entity they visit within the industry, are all at a gold standard level. Hence the reason we are now offering this gold standard program to all the restaurants, gift shops, the tour sites, everyone that is operating within the tourism industry.
And how are you getting the messages out to all of the stakeholders regarding the new protocols and requirements, and also for the people who are wanting to come to Belize, how are we making them aware of what's going to be required of them when they do arrive?
In terms of communication with stakeholders, the BTB has a very good system in place for getting information to stakeholders on a regular basis. So as soon as we have new information to share, we send out e-blasts, and once you're a licensed hotelier or tour operator, or even just you have interest in the tourism industry, you're on our mailing list and the information is shared with you. In terms of communicating with the international market, the travel trade, media, and the consumers / tourists, the BTB works with international marketing agencies who have been alongside us throughout the pandemic, helping to guide us a little bit through these uncharted waters. During the height of the pandemic, we recognized that we had to keep the destination top of mind. So while there was no specific call to action for the destination, we heavily emphasized our empathy for the situation. And as we went through the months and we saw the situation changing a little bit, and we realized that we were nearing that point where we would be ready to reopen, our messaging changed, and there was that direct call to action for visitors to come back again. And we had several different initiatives that were undertaken, which included like a weekly destination postcard, which highlighted various aspects of the destination, whether it was animals of Belize, the beaches, the Maya sites, food, culture, history. We maintained heavy direct contact with the travel trade and the media through our agencies as well. We had destination videos. We were extremely active on social media. Our travel trade team has been working triple time when it comes to webinars and presentations for the destination to create that awareness, as well as to pique the interest of the traveler to visiting Belize when the time was right.
Yeah. You know, it's also, I mean, key for us to look at what are the opportunities that exist for us right now. I read that travelers are looking to stay close to home. And also, we see what's happening with Europe as they start to face a second phase of lockdowns, and their wave keeps on becoming a concern for them. So are these opportunities that we can use for our advantage here in Belize?
I think definitely when it comes to travelers being interested in, they want to travel, they want to get away from, you know, where they've been locked up for the past few months. Belize is definitely at an advantage because we are only at best 2 or 3 hours from some of the key cities in the US. So we're a good destination when it comes to that. We're English speaking. The factor that the director mentioned earlier, that they're looking for health and safety is a #1 priority for them. They're looking for wide open spaces, outdoor activities. They don't want to be in very crowded areas. And when it comes to that, Belize, I mean, we're naturally social distancing just because of our low population density.
And since speaking of neighbors, and just piggybacking a bit off of Marlene's question, what has have we sort of also measured the impact of the sort of loss of travel from, let's say, our closer neighbors, such as the Spanish-speaking countries, such as Mexico, Guatemala, Central America, and even South America, because as we know that we did have, or we've stopped, I should say, some of the Latin American airlines from coming, or they've stopped, I should say. So what sort of impact have we seen there? And if there's any expectation for those sorts of tourists from those areas to come into Belize at some future date?
Gavin, for us, the impact is significant. Basically, we went to zero, and I'm stressing that because it shows where the industry was, as I explained earlier, to where we are today, and how much effort now it will take for us to recover. I do think that our focus now has to be on rebuilding the industry, and for that to happen, a great deal of stakeholder collaboration is necessary. It is a situation that is new to the industry. It's a situation that is new to BTB, and I don't think we could be operating in a vacuum, to say, and think that we will get through this. All the stakeholders with all the expertise and all the tourism minds need to get together and give ideas and input as to how we can rebound and rebuild the industry. What is good for us, what is going, is that we are getting favorable responses from our airlifts. For example, in this month, the opening of the airport, we have had American Airlines from Miami, United from Houston, and now we recently had Tropic flying from Cancun. While that list directly targets the US market, fortunately, coming from Cancun, Tropic is now helping us to get some European passengers as well. That is October. In November, we see that even going further, because then American Airlines will start a daily flight from Miami, and they will change the American Eagle plane to the 738, which is from 72 seats to 172 seats. So 100 seats increased by American Airlines alone. We will have United Airlines daily from Houston, and Delta will start on November 20th from Atlanta. Again, we already got word that that will increase even further in December because American Airlines will start from Dallas, Charlotte, and Los Angeles. United will start from New York and Chicago. Avianca from Salvador, and Sun Country from Minneapolis. That is saying good for Belize because these airlines, they are private entities, they operate based on demand. So I'm sure that these airlines are seeing the same interest that we're seeing here. And if we market together and partner, we are encouraged or we are optimistic that these seats will be filled and we begin to rebuild that tourism industry or that number of arrivals we used to have. By the end of December, we are hoping that we could at least be up to about 40%. We are seeing where stakeholders are showing about 25% occupancy from the projections they have. We are hoping that with now increased marketing and the increased relaxation that started last Friday, we can get up to at least 40% by the end of the year and have a very optimistic or a very bright 2021.
Yeah.
And given that the industry has taken such an impact, how has the local tourism market helped or provided a little boost to these hotels and operators? Have you gotten feedback from the stakeholders in relation to how the local travels have helped them through these difficult times?
We actually had really positive feedback from the stakeholders that did reopen for domestic travel in the summer when the BTB had launched the Belizean Traveler campaign. And while, of course, domestic travel numbers can't compare to international arrivals, it did offer hotels and tour operators the ability to get their operations back up and running, have some of their staff that were forced to be laid off during the lockdown. They were able to get them back in, of course, not at their peak numbers, but at least they were able to bring some of their staff back in to start their operations again. And I think in terms of the Belizean traveler, because we didn't have the opportunity to leave the country for vacation, it definitely created an opportunity for Belizeans to explore and learn more about the country, something that probably many families wouldn't do on a normal basis. But I think it helped to have Belizeans develop or to rekindle that love for their country and all that it has to offer. Of course, Belizeans are our best brand ambassadors because there's nothing like a Belizean speaking about the country and the love that they have for it. It gets others excited and want to visit as well. Yeah. So through the Belizean Traveler campaign, we encouraged local travelers to, explore the country, share your photos on our social media. And of course, our social media has international reach. So international tourists were able to also see some of what was taking place during the lockdown and when we only had domestic travel.
Yeah. Do we know as yet how the stakeholders have gotten through this period? I know there was the relief package that was rolled out. It was absolutely necessary for so many of those who operate tourism-related businesses. Do you have an indicator as to how many of these businesses actually survived through what was just a sledgehammer to the industry?
From what we're seeing, of course, yes, using the word sledgehammer, couldn't have said it better. Yeah. It was a sledgehammer for the industry. I must say that some of the programs implemented through the government really assisted stakeholders. We had the loans through the DFC, the low interest loans. We had the program through Beltrade where grants have been offered. We have the relief where that employees are assisted weekly with the $75. So there have been efforts to help the industry. We also had the domestic travel that helped them a bit. those did help. Yes, I'm sure that some stakeholders are still in an unfortunate position and they're still looking for opportunities to try to rebuild.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we do have quite a few of them starting back and ready to embrace the industry again and get back to where we were in the past. They are really working closer with us. We are getting a lot of suggestions, input, and we could talk at any time. Recently, we are pushing now, as I had mentioned earlier, the gold standard certification for restaurants. Restaurant is not a part of the tourism board's regulatory regime, as I had mentioned, but we already collaborated with BTIA, for example, and they are prepared to assist us in trying to ensure that the restaurants get up to that gold standard level. So I must say that despite the situation, the collaboration and the support that the industry and stakeholders are lending to each other has been very good. And I do think that if we continue on that path, the united effort will help us significantly to rebuild this industry.
You know, I think one of the things that definitely became evident was the great contribution of tourism to our economy. And when we saw just the trickle down effect and what the extent of the damage was, we saw that there was, lack of foreign exchange and so many different things. I say that to say that as people hear the airports open, whether they're involved in the sector or not, they see this as kind of our beginning of our return to normalcy. But we must be cautiously optimistic. And I'm sure there are critical points that for you, you keep on watching, like making sure we don't have too big of an increase in our COVID cases, other things that may actually send us back to the starting point. What are those areas for you?
Definitely the cases, we definitely have to monitor those. We wouldn't want, for example, that the cases continue to increase. The tourists, we know they're already looking for safety and feel that Belize then is not a safe destination because we cannot even control it locally.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that the campaigns being done now would help to have the Belizeans recognize that we have to do what is necessary to contain or to help mitigate the spread of this virus, because tourism is most of our bread and butter, it's our life and livelihood. And if we don't do that and the tourists get a negative impression on Belize, that is the worst thing we want. We would want that all the reports or all the marketing and all the communication from the tourist standpoint is seen as positive, is seen as Belize implementing all the protocols to mitigate the spread of this virus, to be seen as Belize observing the protocols itself to ensure that we mitigate the spread of this virus. So I do think that that is our number one concern, how we move with this virus, how we progress, or how we mitigate it as a country.
Yeah.
That is for me the number one thing, because we know that the tourists looking for safety.
Yeah.
We want them to come here and words get out there that I got to Belize and I got the virus in Belize. That's the last thing we would want to hear.
Yeah, I can imagine. And let's move forward and talk about some of the new marketing options, Misty. I know there is talk of looking at people for long-term stays, reaching out to retirees. I want to talk about those initiatives, and also, we pay attention to U.S. media. We know that there is a very active group of anti-maskers and people who really don't want to subscribe to the type of protocols that we have in place here. Have we encountered any of those along the way?
Fortunately, not that I am aware of. I think everybody has been really cooperative with the protocols, and they know what measures are in place before they get here. I think we've done a really good job at communicating to the traveler what type of expectations they should have in country. And I think we have our own issues locally where we're still working to get Belizeans to recognize the importance of wearing your mask. But not be willing to abide by the proper protocols.
Okay, I think we missed the last part of that there, but you said you haven't seen any of the anti-maskers in Belize as yet. Now talk about the shift in your marketing, or the expansion, I should say, in looking at people who are coming for long-term stays, people who can work from, I guess, paradise instead of home, and retirees. This is some place that you think that you may be able to attract.
Yes, in terms of the marketing, we are expanding our efforts. As you mentioned, long-term stays are definitely an area that we're interested in. For many people across the world, they're still operating in somewhat of a lockdown, work from home situation. So we are looking at opportunities that we have with through our international marketing agencies to see how we can target that type of visitor to come in. Of course, the longer they stay, the more money they spend, the more returns there are for the country. And with the Qualified Retired Persons Program, which targets retirees, there's definitely also an opportunity for us to grow there. We, wider than that in terms of our overall marketing, we are now looking at more focused efforts on a call to action for tourists to visit. We have a really cool campaign called Exhale that we've already started the steps of launching. Exhale, of course, will particularly be featured in our international market, specifically the US. But Exhale really focuses around the idea that for so many, you've been locked up for the past 6-7 months, maybe longer. And we want you to come to Belize and exhale, because you can come here and you relax and you kind of wash away all the stress and the anxiety of the past few months of being in lockdown. So that's a really exciting initiative that we're looking to launching in the US, and there'll be some trickle over effects into our other two major source markets of Canada and Europe as well.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning when you think of the rise in cases that we are seeing in the United States and also Canada as well. How do you, I mean, that's a tough situation. Ideally, you'd want to bring in tourists who are less at risk, but they have been doing the PCR test so far. How many people actually arrive in country with a negative result versus those who do the rapid test here?
I'm not exactly sure of the exact number who come in with the PCR test, but it is a substantial number.
So the majority do?
The majority do bring.
Yeah.
And in terms of those who have to test upon arrival, the turnaround has been really quick. The wait is usually no longer than maybe 25 or 30 minutes. So the Ministry of Health has been doing a really good job at turning around that entire testing process, getting your results and getting the passenger to the other parts of the arrival processing.
And before we wrap it up, Karen, I know nobody is talking about it as much, but there are some people who are very dependent on cruise tourism. What's the outlook there?
Okay, for us, we are preparing. We have started now a local Belize Cruise Task Force that is preparing the local protocols. And because we already have protocols in place for the industry, we will adopt those to cruise. Those will then go up into our regional protocols, because we have a regional task force under which Belize is placed, headed by the Prime Minister of Honduras. And that regional task force then works up into the overall task force of the Americas, which is guided by the CDC. The latest report from them is that the CDC expanded the no-sail order up until October 31st. So we know that no cruise will happen in the Americas until the end of this month. We do expect, though, that may be extended, from what we're seeing. And from the last discussion with the CDC, we understood that they were recommended to extend the no-sail order to February. But I guess objections from the cruise lines, they went back to October 31st. So we are expecting that that will extend and we would not have cruise for the remainder of this year. But we are preparing, we are working with the regional task force, and we will ensure that we are ready for that day when the CDC gives the go-ahead.
All right. Well, ladies, any final comments as we close off this segment for this morning?
For us, we want to thank our stakeholders and thank the Belizean public for the feedback we have been getting on the arrival process. While mostly positive, we did get some suggestions for improvement, which we had implemented, and it's getting better and better. Up to yesterday, I've been getting very, very good feedback, and we are hoping that that continues now and extended to the in-country visit and the in-country experience. We want to remind travelers that there are 3 things that we need to look at prior to boarding or prior to arrival in Belize. 1, please download the health app and complete the required information. You will get back a QR code. Take a screenshot of that, because sometimes, because of the amount of persons landing, the Wi-Fi is a bit limited. So take a screenshot of the QR code to help the Ministry of Health representative to have access to your information when you land. You could take a PCR test and produce a negative result so that you have a fast-track arrival process. Or when you land, you could do a test here in Belize. The process is pretty smooth and simple. About 30 minutes time, you're out of there. So as a reminder to our stakeholders, please continue to apply for the gold standard certification and communicate with the guests, share the information on Belize's arrival and the smooth arrival process and the ease and convenience at which they can enjoy the Belizean experience, and continue to support us and work with us as we rebuild and rebound from this situation.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for talking with us and providing this update. We do appreciate it, and we know that as it gets colder up north, we hope that people start looking at warm Belize as their little safe haven.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go ahead now and take a break. When we come back, we shift our focus. We're talking about men and mental health. Please stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.